Whoa, we're starting already? Step to the left, no to the right. Oh, now back. How are they lunging like that? Turn around? How did I let Jen convince me to come here? Wait, now do what? How are they doing that? You know what? I'm just going to pretend I know what I'm doing in this class and have fun.
Fearless is being the only newbie in class. That's the power of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Federal Employee Program. Learn more about our healthy benefits, tools, and wellness programs at fepblue.org/getactive.
This is the Cover32 Seahawks Show.
Throw down the middle, Doug Baldwin at the 30, 25-20, 15-10-5. Touchdown, Seahawks!
With your host, Kevin Daggett.
Cam Chancellor with the big hit.
Who else would it be but Cam?
And Lee Vowell.
Intercepted! Getting underneath it is Earl Thomas.
Just one step away from CenturyLink Field.
He scrambles upfield, he's hit, he's dropped. Michael Bennett is there to make the sack.
The official podcast of the Cover32 Seahawks website.
Thomas rolls, drags Xavier Rhodes across the goal line, and the Seahawks are on the board.
Go Hawks!
And welcome to the Cover32 Seahawks Show with Kevin Daggett and Lee Vowell. You can hear this show on the Happy Hour Network live and on podcast at cover32.com, of course, iHeartRadio and iTunes. Today our guests will be Steve Balestrieri. Apologize, Steve, if you're already listening. I've talked to Steve several times in my life. I know his last name, Steve Balestrieri. Columnist at patsfans.com and co-host of the Patriots 4th and 2 podcasts. And, of course, our weekly segment with Tim Weaver, managing editor of the Cover32 Seahawks site. This week, seriously, Kevin, I really should start letting you do all this because I suck, obviously. This week, Tim will be looking back to Bills Week and ahead to the Patriots game. It's funny, I can read this stuff. I really should be more like Ron Burgundy and just be like, I can read it, and then whatever is in front of me, I should just, even if it's a bad word. So anyway, the Bills game happened. The Seahawks got to win. They got to win at home. But I'm kind of reversing this outline that we have for the show. Let me just start with this because the greatness was the Seahawks got to win. The weirdness was just the abomination, even if you're a Seahawks fan, because we're upset about the way the officiating has happened the entire season so far for really both teams, but especially the Seahawks. But the abomination that was that end of the first half with the Bills and the Seahawks. So first of all, if you're a Bills fan, how pissed off are you at what happened, and just what's your take on exactly what occurred?
Well, I mean, if I'm a Bills fan, I guess, if you look at it, the biggest thing you should be pissed at is the referees for placing the ball down with 5 seconds left on the play clock. That was probably the most egregious thing in that whole debacle that happened. I guess Richard Sherman got fined $9,000 today for a call that was not made, and if I saw it correctly, didn't he touch the ball? And isn't that if you touch the ball, it's no foul? I don't know what the hell that was, but I mean, if I'm a Bills fan, I guess I'd be upset. It really screwed things up, and I don't even know what to think about that. But it just shocks me how they come and find somebody later for something that was not done or was not called on the field. It just amazes me when they do that.
Yeah, the whole first, I agree. I think the most egregious thing was that if you're a Bills fan, really, if you're watching the NFL and you don't care about either of these teams, the most egregious thing that happened was the fact that the official literally was standing over the ball until there were 5 seconds left on the play clock. But then, as a Seahawks fan and the rest of the NFL, how long did it take after the clock hit 0 for them to stop the play and call a penalty? I mean, if he had kicked it 3 seconds after the clock was 0 and made it, as a Seahawks fan, I'm pissed off. It was awful. I mean, there were several seconds that went by. It hit 0, and they're just standing there, and then they run the play, and then that happens, and I'm like, what in the world is happening? It's almost like they have no officiating whatsoever, and I think that officiating crew have they been suspended for the next week or something's going on. But really, does this just come down to the fact that the officials, National Football League, as Mark Cuban says, the big hogs, and the big hogs also gets slaughtered like everything else, and maybe he's right. But the officials need to be full-time, right? They need to stop their having their day jobs because the NFL should pay them enough to be full-time officials. And it's costing everybody everywhere at some point. So the officials should just be full-time at this point, right?
Well, I heard they make about $175,000 as it is. That's a pretty damn good part-time.
Yeah, I mean,
or full-time
a little bit
job.
less than you and I make, obviously.
Yeah,
I mean,
just a tad.
You know.
But I tell you another thing too that really pisses me off is how Richard Sherman just gets vilified constantly in this league for anything that guy does. He does a pass interference or he chucks a guy. Richard Sherman's this and that. Ever since that thing with Aaron Andrews and Michael Crabtree, it's like Richard Sherman's one of the most stand-up dudes in the league, and in life for that matter, and throughout his life, the things that he's overcome and the path he's taken, and they just try to vilify the guy. I mean, what the kicker's wife said was ridiculous, and just the Richard Sherman intentionally did that. That was a cheap shot. No, it wasn't. If it was a cheap shot, he wouldn't have got up and walked away. He would have gotten the guy's face. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Did the kicker not remind you? No offense. I mean, I can understand if you're a Bills fan what looked like how. And just by the way, head of officiating is Kayla Carpenter, wife of the Bills kicker. We should put that on the table. But did it not remind you? And look, you and I both like soccer. I'm a huge Bayern Munich fan. Huge. I watch Bundesliga soccer all the time. But did that kicker not remind you of a stereotypical soccer guy where, I'm injured. No, I'm really not. I'm going to get up and kick a 54-yard field. He made that look worse than it was, did he not?
Yeah, exactly. And guys do that, but it did. And that's one of the I love the game of soccer. I grew up playing it, but that is one of the most irritating things when those guys go down with non-injuries after they never got hit and do that. But that's exactly what it was. And I would suggest that maybe he go play soccer. I don't know, but
he probably did. I mean, he's a kicker. I'm sure he played soccer at some point. But yeah, I mean, it was just as much as injured as he looked after Sherman hit him. To me, that kind of goes back to the fact that maybe the play wasn't as egregious as it looked because he acted like he was out for the year, like he would never play football again. And then, when the clock stops, I'm totally fine. It was like, come on, give me a break, Mm-hmm. So, but a guy who did have a huge first half, and really the offense had a great first half and didn't play so great in the second half, was Jimmy Graham. This is the first of his 2 touchdowns in the first half.
Russell out of the shotgun. Here comes the rush. Russell's got to get it away. Down to the back of the end zone. Into the arms of the receiver. It's Jimmy Graham. There's a flag down. And it's a touchdown. Seahawks. Jimmy Graham with a man hanging all over him. Reaches up. Makes the catch. The penalty won't count. And the Seahawks are once again, if this touchdown stands, and it looks like it will, a point away from tying it up.
How great was Jimmy Graham in that first half? Did he have all his catches in the first half? He didn't he?
He had majority of them, and I tell you what, that is pretty impressive. You catching touchdowns with the guy holding your hand as you're running into the end zone. I mean, that's just crazy. 2 one-handed touchdown catches. That's they figured out how to use Jimmy Graham. They really figured out how to. That's one positive thing about this offense that you can take away this season is they figured out how to use Jimmy Graham.
Yeah, I think one thing that bothers me about non-Seahawks fans or people who don't watch the Seahawks very much is the fact that, they figured out how to use Jimmy Graham this game. Actually, when he's been healthy this season, over the last 6 games, he's averaged 6 catches and 82 yards a game. They figured out how to use him really the last couple of games, 2 or 3 games before he got injured last season. So this is not a new thing where, the Seahawks figured out how to use him. That kind of aggravates me, but it is what it is. His second catch, which we're about to play Steve Rabel's call of his second catch, was even better, I think, because, again, you mentioned he literally only had one hand because it was pass interference. This is what the second touchdown of the first half for Jimmy Graham sounded like.
Close sights in the backfield. Here comes a four-man rush, and Russell's going to throw for the end zone. He's got a man, Jimmy Graham! Does he hang on to it? He does! Touchdown! Seahawks! Jimmy Graham jumps up and spikes the ball. Another spectacular sliding, diving, one-armed, it looked like from here. Reception by number 88. This guy is unbelievable. Jimmy Graham, 2 touchdown receptions in this half and 94 yards in reception. Do you think they found number 88?
Well, I think Russell has a lot of trust in number 88.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was just, it's a great thing to see Jimmy Graham involved. It worries me a little bit in the second half that people made adjustments. They couldn't get him as involved, and against the Saints, obviously. The Saints had 3 safeties instead of cornerbacks playing, so it made sense that they shut down Jimmy Graham a little bit better. But in your opinion, really, before we're joined by Tim Weaver in just a minute or so, what's the difference between, to you, what we saw in the first half of the Saints game, the entire game in the Saints game, and then the first half against the Bills? It was night and day, right?
As far as the offense goes, I mean, it's pretty obvious what the change was. It's the power forward George Fant coming in. I mean, the guy's dominating.
The offense needs more basketball players, right? They got Fant, they got Graham. Let's get them on the court together. It's the best basketball team in the NFL.
That's right. Tobias Harris is available. I think we can pick him up.
Yeah, it's just. You're joking, but what do you think about Fant? I mean, he didn't have a great game against the. Well, he didn't have a great first half against the Saints. Played okay in the second half. This is a guy who didn't play any football in his life until he was 36. What do you think about? I'm joking, obviously, but what do you think about his play against the Bills?
I tell you what, I mean, this Schneider guy and this Pete Carroll guy, they sure like to go out on a limb and go after the underdog, but that is, I mean, seriously, that is stretching it out to the underdog when you get a guy that hasn't played started a game since 8th grade, and
yeah,
I mean, hey, more power to him if the guy can play, and the offense. I guess what was the statistic that they've gone from the highest paid offensive line to the lowest paid offensive line, and if you're going to pay a guy $15 an hour to play left tackle, I guess you got to go with what you can get.
Yeah. I think the only thing that concerns me is that John Schneider seems to be scouting maybe basketball games more than football games. But anyway, Kevin, tell us about our first great guest and managing editor.
That's right. We welcome Tim Weaver to the show, the great Tim Weaver, managing editor of the Cover32 Seahawks site. Tim, how are you this evening?
I'm just peachy. Thanks for having me. How are you guys?
Tim is not peachy, and neither am I. Let's be honest. I mean, we're still suffering. It's not Seahawks suffering, but it's life suffering. So Tim is lying out his teeth already. So I'll just say that, as well as I am. So Tim, I'm sorry that you have to show up 2 days after a tragedy, but we're here to talk Seahawks. So thank you for being on.
Yeah. Happy to be
Hey,
here.
it was Lee's idea to do the show tonight, so.
I like Tim.
It's all canceled. It's all, we're calling the whole thing off. The website's down. Everything is done.
I like how I go through that whole thing, and Tim's like, "Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Let's move on."
Well, moving on to sports. Tim, how wacky was the ending of that first half? And if you're on the Bills side of things, how pissed off are you? And then as a follow-up to that, the bigger concern, I think, is what's with the officiating in the NFL right now? Is it that they can do instant replay and everything, so they're making questionable calls and going back and researching it, or what's the deal?
Well, I don't know how a Bills fan may feel. I can tell you what I've been reading on Twitter the last few days. They're not happy at all. They think Richard Sherman should be kicked out of the league, and he's the worst person in the world, and all these horrible things. He made a play for the ball. Why isn't anyone saying if Carpenter had just not played after the whistle, none of this would have happened? He had a choice. He decided to keep playing and go for the kick, and so Richard Sherman kept playing too. If he had just not tried to make the kick, none of this would have happened. But everyone needs to blame Richard Sherman because he's a supervillain, like you mentioned, ever since the NFC Championship game a couple of years ago, everyone just loves to pile on him. It doesn't matter what he does, even though he's just a fantastic guy, really bright. Went to Stanford, everything. Oh, he's a thug. He's an idiot. He's a terrible. It's just ridiculous, the reputation that he has. But the officiating, what strikes me is that everyone is upset this year. It's not just Bills fans now or Falcons fans a few weeks ago with the Julio Jones thing. It's everyone. Seahawks fans are mad. Patriots fans are mad. Everyone just thinks that they're getting shafted. And when it's that universal, you have to think that there's something going on. And I think you have a point about the officials being part-time versus full-time, even though I had no idea they were making that much money. It seems strange that the NFL is this multi-billion-dollar organization who is operating tax-exempt, by the way, and they make profits off getting their stadiums funded by taxpayers and everything, but they can't hire full-time officials and just have them. Why can't they have the officials, even if it's your day off, it's not, you're not going to officiate a game every single day. Why don't they spend the other 5 days of the week or 4 days of the week looking at film, reviewing what they did, spend 8 hours a day in the office doing that kind of stuff so that you can prevent this kind of stuff from happening in the future? It's just so bizarre to me that they won't pay for that or put that kind of investment into the way the referee should be calling the game.
Well, that might cut into Ed Hockley's gym time if he had to go review tape. But what the Seahawks offense, they look pretty good in the first half against the Bills, and the Bills are a pretty good team, but they look like crap against the Saints, who are a pretty bad team. Any idea what's going on there?
Saints game was just so bizarre on so many levels. I think that part of it was Wilson wasn't healthy. Getting him back to the way he really is, that was the most encouraging thing that we saw on Monday night. He has this mobility. I think early on he was able to scramble out and even though he just threw the ball away, he said, okay, here we go. You could see that he was moving much more naturally, and he didn't seem hampered by his the little knee brace or whatever he had on, and his right ankle seems to be fine too. So that's just really, really big to be able to move around, even though I didn't do too much of it. He did score a touchdown early on, that bootleg run, and a few other times where he had little vintage scrambles, but didn't run the ball too much. But just him being able to move around and be nimble in the pocket or get out of it when he needs to makes such a big difference. And he was fantastic. That was probably one of the best halves that we've ever seen from him. I think he was pretty close to having a perfect passer rating at halftime. In the end, I think he was around 137 or so. So his leap there, just getting back to full health, I think is the real difference that we saw.
Yeah, it helps to have the braces off a little bit, off of the knees. You could see he was just more agile, even with having those braces off. So, what did you think about the wife of Bills kicker Dan Carpenter, Kayla, who's head of officiating for the NFL, as we already discussed, posted on social media about Richard Sherman castration thing after the game, and what did you think about Sherman's reaction to Kayla's post?
Well, what he said was disgusting and racist. That's, we can beat around it and say, oh, she was being ignorant, or she tried to say it was a joke. No, it was a racist thing to say, and she knows exactly what she was doing. And it's sad that a lot of these people are being emboldened now. We don't want to get too much into current events, but Richard Sherman, he was very classy. I think he replied back with some crying emojis and say, LOL, thanks, have a good day. He's not going to get engaged with trash like that. He's too classy to get involved with people like that. And I think it's really telling. He said later, I think he talked to Craig Bell and said, you never see people do these things in person. You will hear the worst things on Twitter or Facebook. People will say all kinds of garbage. They will threaten you. They will just say the worst things you can imagine. And in person, they will never happen because they have to be more reserved. They have to act like an actual human being when you're face-to-face with somebody. So it's disappointing that she would stoop to that level. I understand, if your wife or your husband gets hurt in a game, you'd be naturally understand. But if I'm Chris Carpenter, I would say, hey, you're making me look bad. This is my job. I'm a kicker, but I'm going to get hit occasionally. She should know that this is a part of what he does and not react so strong to it. That's just disappointing in every way to see that.
Yeah, and breaking news, I don't know if anybody says, immediately after the tweet, Trump had Kayla Carpenter as his Secretary of Industry, which I thought was interesting. So, anyway, a third down defense is still a problem. You know, time of possession remains extremely one-sided, even in the Bills game. What's going on third down? I mean, is the defense is it going to be worn out by the end of the year because they're putting out, they can't get the other offense off the field on third down. The Seahawks don't seem to be able to run the ball enough to have time of possession. Are we seeing this team, is the defense possibly going to break down by the games 14 through 16 because they're so worn out?
They're definitely getting there, and I don't think this is just a unique problem this year, even though the last few weeks, not having Cam Chancellor is a big deal. We mentioned this last week a little bit. I feel like they lose their will to tackle to some extent when he's not out there. I don't know what it is. They had a really tough time stopping them on third down. Even third and short, when the Bills, it was clear that they were going to run the ball. They converted every time. I don't know if we stopped them on 3rd and 1 at all the entire game. And a bigger issue may have been having Michael Bennett out, even though Cliff Avril was magnificent and he was getting pressure on Tyler Taylor a lot. Bennett gets into the backfield a lot. He stuffs a lot of runs. People don't think of him as a run stopper. He's really excellent at doing that. He gets in the backfield and he nips a lot of these running plays in the bud. But the bigger issue on third down, I think, it's systemic. It's not having just one or two guys out. This was a problem last year, too, on 1st and 10 and 3rd and 10 and 3rd and long. Chris Richard likes to do these deep zones. We're going to do these heavy cover 4, cover 6, cover 12 defenses, and, we're going to let them dump it off underneath, and it's not been working. These 3-man rushes, they're not getting the pressure. That's how the Bills got into position at the end of the first half to begin with. I said, here comes the 3-man rush, and they're going to get in field goal range. We're lucky it turned out the way it did with all the insanity that happened at the end of the half, the officiating, but very easily could have kicked 3 points, and it could have been a different game there. But I think that's a big adjustment that needs to be made. I think they're too soft, playing with the lead, and when the other team is in 3rd and long situations, they do too much zone. I think they need to dial up some more blitzes and play more man-to-man. It becomes predictable, and it's been about a year and a half now. They've been getting beaten situations too much, so they're going to need to make an adjustment there.
Yeah, and I have another question before we move on to Kevin's next question. But you mentioned Cliff Avril, who is he and Bobby Wagner are really the two best players on this defense this year. But, Sherman gets a lot of press because he's great, but he also, he's effervescent and he speaks his mind, and Michael Bennett does the same thing, and he's great as well. But really, how underrated, just generally speaking as football players and how great they are Cliff Avril and Bobby Wagner?
Well, you just never hear about him. That's what I don't get. Luke Kuechly is probably the best middle linebacker in the game, and he gets all these accolades. Everyone knows who he is. He's a big A-list star. Bobby Wagner just flies under the radar so much, even though he's in the top 5 in tackles every year. I thought he was phenomenal in the Monday night game, even though he had that late roughing the passer penalty, which kind of brutal. But Seahawks definitely wouldn't have been close. They wouldn't have won that game without Wagner, even though the defense was struggling overall on the job of calling the plays. His play recognition, the speed. That's what I think one of my favorite quotes when Frank Gore was with the 49ers that Bobby Wagner is fast as blank, 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 blank. People don't understand how quick he is from side to side and how difficult it is to run east to west on the Seahawks because of what he's able to do and get around people. So you can't really say enough about what Wagner does. And Cliff Avril is exactly the same way. I think he could lead the league in sacks this year if he gets enough chance. Well, he was held so many times last week. That's going to be a problem. I don't know what was going on there. It's another thing. People complain about Carpenter getting hit. How many times was Cliff Avril held? And that wasn't called. I think he won NFC Defensive Player of the Month for October. And right now, I could say he's probably the MVP, not just on the defense, but this whole season for the Seahawks. Who's been playing better than Cliff Avril? I think he's got to be the MVP so far.
Hey, Tim, Seattle travels out to New England for a Sunday night game, and thank goodness it's a Sunday night game. I don't know who did that schedule Monday night and then fly clear across the country. But New England's got a pretty good short passing game that it can obviously give Seattle fits, and they've got a pretty good tight end to boot to go with that. What can Seattle possibly do to slow that down?
It's tough. It's a really good offense they have. They're 7-1, even though they didn't have Brady the first 4 games. And they got such a boost of him coming back, and right now I think he's graded at like 96.4 by Pro Football Focus, which is just insane. I don't think I've ever seen a quarterback rated that high there. It's tough to game plan against them. I think the Seahawks did really well for most of Super Bowl 49. It wasn't until Averill got injured, I think that was the big changing point in the fourth quarter. Pass rushers just got tired. They just weren't able to get the same pressure that they were able to do. But the one thing you've seen consistently with Brady, and this is true with pretty much all quarterbacks, if you hit him early on in the game, if he feels pressure, he doesn't like that. He's not like a Ben Roethlisberger or a Cam Newton. He's not a huge hulking kind of quarterback, so he can't take hits, and he doesn't like to be pressured like that, and you can kind of throw him off his game. So I think that's the key, slowing down that offense, because yes, he's an incredible quarterback and everything. He's going to be a Hall of Famer, but they also run the ball really well. They don't get credit for that so much as they should. LeGarrette Blount is a very, very big man. He's kind of downhill style, and James White is kind of shifty, and he can catch passes out of the backfield and whatnot. You kind of got to make them pick and choose. You can't let them run and pass on you. I think that's the real key there. So if I was calling it up, I'd say get to Tom Brady early, get to him often, and try to throw him off his game. Because if he gets into a rhythm, you're going to be in trouble.
And where do the Seahawks have advantages against Patriots Sunday?
I don't know. I wish I had a better answer for you, but it's a really deep team. There's not a whole lot of disadvantages they have. On defense, they are really tough right now. I think they're averaging 16.5 points per game. They're giving up. Only Minnesota is lower than them, just about 0.3 lower than the Seahawks after Buffalo went off for 25 points this week. Their secondary is just excellent. Devin McCourty is one of the best safeties in the league. Malcolm Butler is not this one-hit wonder as much as we might like him to be. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to think about it. But pretty good cover corner. They have a great linebacker core, too. Dante Hightower is great. They're so good that they got rid of Jamie Collins. I was just shocked. For a third-rounder, they gave him up to Cleveland because they didn't want to pay him $10 million or $11 million, however much he was asking for. But that just speaks to the depth that they have there. But if they do have one weak spot on defense, I think it's their defensive line. They don't really have any names. They don't have anybody who can kill your quarterback and take advantage of a bad offensive line, which should help the Seahawks because that would be a big problem otherwise.
So you're saying that Cleveland has two good players now, Collins and Joe Thomas. That's about it. So, and maybe one advantage that the Seahawks have, and it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it's kind of the truth, John Ryan. I mean, he could be the difference maker in this game a little bit if he can pin the Patriots back if the Seahawks can do enough. So, the Seahawks are 2 games ahead in the NFC West because for some reason the NFC West just sucks this year, including the Cardinals. And the Pats are 3 up in the NFC East, the Dolphins really being the only team that's kind of gaining anything. So does this really diminish the importance of this game a bit, and why or why not?
I don't think so. I think Pete Carroll won't admit it. I think Bill Belichick obviously is not, you wouldn't want to play poker against him. You're not going to get a whole lot there. They're not going to say anything about Super Bowl 49, but it's clear that this is a huge deal. This is an all-time rematch. This is Rocky against whoever it was faced for the sequel. Bullwinkle, that's right. But it's a big deal. Even though, I think the Seahawks have 31 players that were on the team now, as opposed to at Super Bowl 49. This was the biggest. The ending of the Super Bowl obviously will go down in history. It was one of the best games that's ever. I may never watch it again. I don't think I'll ever have the stomach to do it, but I remember it was a fantastic game. That's one of the best Super Bowls that was ever played. And hopefully, Monday night game was great, and the NFL's had some ratings problems this year. Donald Trump likes to take credit for it. I don't think that has much to do with it. I think it's just they've had bad primetime games. This is going to help get them back on track, I think. It's going to be a great game. I'm not feeling incredibly confident, but it's a big deal. I'm fairly excited to see what happens.
And you're not super excited about this Thursday night game between the Browns and the Ravens?
I'm not even. The Bulls are on at the same time. I'm not even
Yeah, actually, I was thinking Carolina versus Duke. That's what I'm tuning into. So, big Carolina fan. not Carolina football, North Carolina. So, one last question. Who wins and why?
I have to pick the Patriots. I think it's just too much to overcome on the road. They never lose at Foxborough or Gillette Stadium, whatever they call it. When the line opened in Vegas, so they're up by 9.5 points, and that's just I think it's about 8 points now or something like that. I think it's too much to ask without having Michael Bennett. I think if he's healthy, you could have a chance to get after Brady and throw him off his game, but they're just playing too well right now. At home, I'm going to pick Patriots by a touchdown.
And that makes sense. So, Tim, thanks for being on. Of course, we're happy to be a part of the Cover32 Seahawks site. Will you let people know where they can read your stuff and find you on social media?
Well, I am taking an extended social media break for a while until it calms down. But you can read our stuff at cover32.com/Seahawks.
So you're saying you're off Facebook for 4 years?
I'm just...
All right. Thanks, Tim. I may join you. So thanks for being on. Talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you, guys.
So Tim's always great. He's a friend of mine. So at this point, talked to Steve Balestrieri several times. He's a super nice guy, and one thing we try to do on this show is have conversations with people who cover other teams, and it's never to the degree of, oh, we're arguing. I really enjoy, and I know Kevin enjoys hearing the other part, the other take of different teams. So we are joined now by Steve, and Steve is a columnist at patsfans.com and host of Patriots 4th and 2 podcast, which is great. Anybody listening? Steve, thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me, guys. I always like talking football with you, so this is a fun time of year.
Thank you.
First thing I'll say is I like Tom Brady. I know a lot of people don't like Tom Brady. I like Tom Brady because I like his story. Although he did take the job from my guy Drew Bledsoe. I went to Washington State, but my wife cannot stand Tom Brady. So just get that out. But Steve, you wrote earlier at Pats.com recently that the Patriots may have not played their best football yet. First, how scary should the rest of the NFL be? How scared should the rest of the NFL be to that remark? And what makes the Patriots? What can make the Patriots even better?
Well, I think when I wrote that, I thought that the offense hadn't reached its full potential yet because Julian Edelman's still been hobbled a little bit by that sore foot that he broke last year, and he has the plate in it. He hasn't really been 100% with his quickness that we're used to seeing. And, early in the season, Gronkowski was hobbled by a bad hamstring, and that's when Martellus Bennett picked up the slack in the first couple of games. He was really, he was putting up some really good numbers. Now he's got a bum ankle, and he's just getting back to, close to 100%. And now Gronkowski's been picking up his slack a little bit. When those guys get healthy, and this week, I think we're going to see Dion Lewis come back. I think now all the pieces are going to start coming together. Last year at this time, the Patriots were all beat up. This year, they're starting to get healthy this time of year. That's why I'm thinking that, there's a good possibility that they may be even better than they have been at the beginning of the season. So we're all holding out hope that Dion Lewis gets to play this Sunday, and he brings a whole other dimension to the Patriots' offense.
Now, in your opinion, what separates Belichick from the rest of his coaching brethren? And it just seems that it doesn't matter what the personnel is on that team, he gets the Patriots in a position to contend every year. How is that?
Well, he's a workaholic, obviously. And he's a student of the game. And, the one thing that I think that he does that a lot of coaches don't do is a lot of coaches have a system, and they try to make the players fit into their system. Belichick will tweak his system to utilize the player doing what he does best. So, I think that's what separates. It's such a thin line when you're talking about winning and losing in the NFL. There's always just one or two plays per game that you can look at to say, hey, if this had gone different here, it might have been a different game. We say that every week, when we look at games. And I think those are the little things that Belichick does better than anybody. They evaluate a player, and, they'll ask him to do a bunch of things. We've seen it down here, in training camp and mini camps, and they'll ask a guy to do a bunch of different things, and they find out what he does best and what he doesn't do, exceptionally well, and they'll ask him just to do what he does best in their system, and they'll tweak it to utilize that, and I think that's a really big thing.
Yeah, he does. And we've talked about that on this show, just about how Belichick gets the best, not really the best out of his players, but he uses his players' strengths towards that game plan, whatever it is. So, but one player he doesn't really necessarily have to game plan for is Tom Brady, because he's been a part of the system for so long, and he's a great quarterback, obviously, one of the greatest ever. But he seems to be possibly playing the best of his football life. And is it really just a matter of he does have the chip on his shoulder, or is there something else going on?
Well, I'm up here, so many people are in this whole, that's the big story, the Tom Brady revenge story. I'm not buying that. You can't play angry for 12 weeks and then get into the playoffs. you can't stay mad that long. I mean, that would tear you up. So, he's always so focused, and we've seen it. I mean, at minicamp, he blows up when guys don't do their job right. He's harder on himself than anybody. He's just so focused. And I think this time away was I'm not going to say an eye-opener, because he's always known his football mortality, I should say. But I think this was an opportunity to look at things from a distance. And he knows he's closer to the end than the beginning at this point. And I think he's even more focused than he has been in the past, because now he realizes, the clock is ticking. They did really well with Jimmy Garoppolo for, a game and a half until he got hurt. But I think that just lit a little bit of a fire under him, because it's like now he can – before there was never any, they brought guys in every year at quarterback, and Brady just, whatever. But I think now he sees that Jimmy Garoppolo, if he was to get hurt or decide to retire, I think he sees now that Garoppolo can do the job. Maybe not as well as him, but, in time he could be a really good quarterback.
That's an interesting take. So it's almost like the backup quarterback is motivating Brady more than even the NFL or the opposition at this point. Is that right?
Yeah, that's how I took this, because usually we're down there every day in the summertime, and you watch training camp and you get to see the whole practice. Unlike now, where you see 15 minutes, and basically the warm-ups. But you watch them in training camp, and it was always years and years and years. Brady getting 90% of the snaps, and the backup quarterbacks get a little bit here or there. This year, because they knew they were facing that, they were split 50-50. And Garoppolo would maybe start the first-team reps in one practice, and Brady would do the next time, and they'd go back and forth. But I think this lit a fire under him, and because he was ultra competitive, even more so than he normally is. And this is practice, But you can see it. I mean, he's always very competitive. He's always very focused, and that's another reason why they get a lot out of their players, because these guys come in and they know they have to be on top of their game.
I thought you were going to break into an Allen Iverson there for a second with the practice. That would have been funny. So, obviously one reason the Patriots are playing so well at this point is the defense seems to be almost those back to the early Brady years when he won Super Bowls. What has the defense playing so well, and is this really the best defense since those early years of Brady Super Bowls?
Actually, if I was to pick a weakness right now, it would be the defense. I don't think they've played that well, really. Yeah, they're number 2 in points allowed, but they're not playing well in the middle of the field. They haven't done well on third down. They haven't done well in the red zone, and they haven't really got a good pass rush this year. And they do tighten things up, and that's always been the Belichick thing. they play that bend but don't break. They try to keep plays in front of them. They'll give up the short stuff, but they don't. They try to stop guys from getting those big chunk plays down the field. And they've done that again this year. They've only given up one pass of 40-plus yards, and that was against Antonio Brown, I believe. But, yeah, they haven't really played that well. They've tightened things up in the red zone, and they haven't given up a lot of points. But I think if you ask anybody up here, how do you think the defense has played, most people would say they haven't played very well.
Well, our defense hasn't played very well on third down lately either, so this ought to be a very interesting game for third down statistics. And moving on. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just finished writing my keys to the game. It's going to be published tomorrow, and that's what I wrote. I look at Russell Wilson, I look at Tom Brady. This is national TV on Sunday night. I don't think this is going to be one of those 13-10 games.
No, I don't think so either. Anyways, looking forward to that game. Where do the Patriots match up best with the Seahawks, except third down?
Yeah. Well, I don't think either defense matches up really well on third down this week. But with the Patriots, they have that quickness. They have the guys on the outside that the guys like Edelman and Danny Amendola and Chris Hogan. That quick passing game that can get the chains moving. I think that's where they're going to have, just like in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, they're going to have to hit on those. And then, like Josh McDaniels said to them 2 years ago, there'll be no running side to side. If you run side to side, they'll kill you. So when you catch the ball, you go up the field. If you get 1 yard after the catch, then we'll live with that. If you get 2 yards, we're happy. Because if you go side to side, you're going to lose. And I think that's going to be their focus this week. And if they can get those little short things working, I think then they'll be able to take a couple of shots down the seams with the two tight ends.
What are a couple of your biggest concerns facing Seattle this weekend?
Russell Wilson. I love Russell Wilson, but I don't like him when the Patriots play him. Because mobile quarterbacks they don't do well against mobile quarterbacks, and Belichick will not get aggressive against him. You'll see that the defensive end, they're going to try to just contain him and keep him in the pocket, and you'll see him with lots of time to throw this weekend. Now, if they don't have any breakdowns, he won't have the room to run around, but they do not get after mobile quarterbacks and guys like Russell Wilson. Now, a guy like Tyrod Taylor, who actually had a good game last week, but, if you give him time but you keep him in the pocket, he tends to overthrow things. Russell Wilson can make you pay from the pocket. He scares me this week. He always does every time the Patriots play him, and that's not going to change. I think he's the game breaker. And of course, Jimmy Graham's having a good year, and they're going to have a tough time matching up with him.
So beyond the Seahawks and specifically this matchup this week, what 2 or 3 teams in the AFC do you see as the biggest obstacles to the Patriots making the Super Bowl?
Well, I think Denver, because of their defense. I mean, I don't think their offense is what it has been in the past, especially now they lost C.J. Anderson in the running game, and they have he's not really a rookie, but he's a first-year quarterback in Simeon. But their defense is the kind that if you have to go to Denver, and the Patriots will go there in December, if Denver wins that football game, you might end up having to go there in the playoffs, and that is a really tough place to play. And that defense is the kind that can shut you down enough where they can win one of those 17-14, 20-17 type games. And I think the other team would be Pittsburgh if they get healthy, because when Ben Roethlisberger is on, they have the ability to light it up at any given moment.
Yeah, and I think as just a Seahawks fan, watching the AFC last year, I was thinking how great that Broncos defense was, and they were still barely able to beat the Patriots. So it was, to me, it's like the Patriots have the AFC. maybe I don't know how you are as a Patriots fan, but we as Seahawks fans are always like, don't give us too much love. It's like a jinx, and I don't know how you are as a Patriots fan. But it's like it's like don't give us too much credit because it'll. But anyway, Steve, you've been on shows I've hosted several times. You seem like a genuinely nice guy, and I really appreciate your insight and just you being on the show. So will you let people know where you can be found on social media and just find the stuff you write?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at SteveB7SFG. That's my old military unit. And you can find me at PatsFans.com. We also do a podcast called Patriots 4th and 2. And we have a lot of fun on that. We were planning on doing a pregame show on Sunday evening, but I think one of the guys is going to be traveling, so we'll probably hold off until Monday.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for being on, and hopefully we'll meet you in the Super Bowl and we can have a discussion about that.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I think that would be great for both teams. We had a rematch from 2014.
Absolutely. Great for the NFL. So, all right. Thank you, and have a great week.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
So, yeah, I mean, basically that's our show. Steve Balestrieri is always great. He's been on, I think he was on Nicky X Happy Hour. Murph is a friend of mine, a friend of the show, and he used to be a co-host on Baseball, Beer, and Barbecue, and he knows Steve, and Murph does a great job on his podcast as well, and writes his stuff. So Murph, if you're listening, thank you. And it's always nice to have friends like Steve and like Murph. So, any thoughts on what Steve was saying, Kevin, as far as the Patriots Seahawks game?
Yeah, I just think it's going to be a tall order for the Seahawks to pull this one off on us. I mean, I always root for my team, but Tom Brady is so tough, and Belichick plays to the competition, and he knows how to beat people, and the little quote unquote, I hate this term, but the little dink and dunk passes, they kill the Seahawks, and they've done that before and killed the Seahawks, and I don't imagine they're going to stop doing it. And the Seahawks have not been good on third down. They have not stopped a lot of this stuff going across the middle. Tight ends across the middle have been a problem for them for a while. So we'll see. I don't know. I mean, fortunately it's a later game, technically 5:30 for the Seahawks. So it'll be at least it's not a 10 a.m. game.
That's actually a great point. I didn't even think about that. But hashtag truth on the other stuff. I mean, like you pointed out, it's that dink and dunk stuff that the Patriots can do. They can do other stuff, obviously, but they do that really well. And the Seahawks have really just struggled with that the entire season, if not into last season. And, a lot of people like to, if Lynch would have run it, they would have won the Super Bowl and yada, yada. You know what kind of really lost the Seahawks momentum in that game? Jeremy Lane getting hurt. Yeah. And if Jeremy Lane stays healthy with everybody else, I don't think it's a game at the end. I think the Seahawks win that Super Bowl. And you saw the difference that he made covering the slot. And again, teams have changed. I mean, there's no Michael Bennett, there's no Cam Chancellor going into this game, so the Seahawks are even worse off. But I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. A lot of people like to harp on the fact that Lynch didn't run it, but they probably would have never been in that position if Jeremy Lane would have been healthy throughout that entire second half, right?
No, I would agree with you. The other thing that concerns me is the Seahawks ran the ball 10 times last Sunday. I mean, we're not a passing team, but we became a passing team last week, and I don't know how I don't know how that's going to work out. I mean, it's Steve said they're going to Russell Wilson. They're not going to put a lot of pressure on Wilson. You don't need to put a lot of pressure on that offensive line to get by them. I mean, it's not. No. It's not the most solid front in the NFL. So that'll be interesting.
It's crazy. And going back to that Bills game, did they run the ball 10 times? Yeah. And they won the game with Russell Wilson being a little bit more mobile. But, we say that. The same thing happened in the Saints game. It makes me wonder, does this team, even as Christine Michael has been productive in the runs he's had, do they really just have no faith in him to try to consistently carry the ball 20 times a game? Because that's what they used to do with Lynch. And I'm not saying Christine Michael is Lynch because Thomas Rawls isn't Lynch. How many running backs are actually Marshawn Lynch? Not many, but it still concerns me that they have such small faith in him. They don't even let him really run half the time in games, right? They don't even try to establish that, which they should have against the Saints. So are they?
If you look at Marshawn Lynch run, he didn't gain. How many times did he get stopped behind the line of scrimmage? Quite a few. How many times did he get 1 or 2 yards? Quite a few. But he busts them every once in a while, and that's why he's Marshawn Lynch beast mode. Christine Michael, he's been a pretty good running back, and I agree. I don't know why they don't just give him the ball, feed him the ball, and CJ process. I mean, you're a running team still. I guess. I mean, that's what I hear, but we'll see. I don't think they're becoming a not one. I would agree. But
yeah, I think that one thing that really, I guess maybe the Seahawks, and maybe rightfully so, is that they and I tried to defer. Oh, it's not that Marshawn Lynch beast mode mentality that really separated this team and made them a great team, because they're still a very good team, although I still don't think they're a championship game team at this point. I mean, they beat the Bills, who are a good team, but they beat them at home, and they lost to the Saints. It's almost like if you're Tennessee, you beat Tennessee Tech. Oh, who cares? But it's almost like Christine Michael, when he runs well, but he runs out of bounds, whereas Marshawn Lynch, if he got near the sidelines, he wouldn't just run out of bounds. If you had a defensive back coming up on you, he would attack that defensive back. And that did seem to, and that's not even like hyperbole, like he literally did it. You think about his greatest runs against the Saints, against the Cardinals, it was almost like he was relishing, I hope somebody tries to tackle me along the sideline. So it makes you wonder if that's really what separated this team from previous teams, is Lynch wasn't very good last year because he was so banged up, and he seemed like the age kind of caught up with him. But he still had that kind of mentality when he was in the game. Okay, we've got Lynch. And I feel like they're kind of waiting on, like, okay, once we get Rawls back, we'll kind of go back. Do you get that same feeling?
Yeah, because Rawls runs the same way as Lynch. I mean, he doesn't run out of bounds either. So, but he hasn't proved to be that durable. So.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he hasn't. Neither has Procise and Paul Richardson. I feel like it's still one of these things. If everybody was healthy, and it's the NFL, so nobody's going to be completely healthy all the time. But if you get a healthy Graham and a healthy Rawls, and then you got a healthy Baldwin and a healthy Russell, and then, you got Lockett, a healthy Lockett. And people haven't been talking about Lockett a whole lot, but in that first half, he was a beast when it came to punt returns, kick returns, catching the ball, running the ball. But if you get all those guys healthy at the same time, I think they're one of the two best teams in the NFL, are they not?
Yeah, they are.
So, anyway, the Seahawks play a Sunday night game against the Patriots in Foxborough. I don't have high hopes because first of all, it's in New England. There's no Bennett. There's no Cam. Russell's still banged up, even though he's not, he's not as bad as he seems to have been a couple of weeks ago. There's no Rawls. I don't have high hopes for this game, but even if they lose it, they go back to 5-3-1. They're still going to have the division lead, and then the rest of the schedule is going to be okay. And we'll talk about that more in the coming season. But before we play our outro, Kevin, any final words?
Go Hawks.
4th and goal from the 15. 4th Seattle sack. And this may very well be the last play of the game. Here we go. Taylor empties the backfield. They got to go for broke. Takes the shotgun snap. 3-man rush. He's going to slide left. He looks. He fires to the end zone. It's incomplete. It's incomplete. No flags. No flags with 13 seconds left. And the Seahawks are going to win on an amazing stand in the close of this game against an offense that has moved up and down the field on them. The Seahawks defense holds, and Seattle is going to win. Holy catfish! What a game, what a stand by the Seattle D.
Oh, we're starting already? Step to the left, no to the right. Oh, now back. How are they lunging like that? Turn around? How did I let Jen convince me to come here? Wait, now do what? How are they doing that? You know what? I'm just going to pretend I know what I'm doing in this class and have fun.
Fearless is being the only newbie in class. That's the power of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Federal Employee Program. Learn more about our healthy benefits, tools, and wellness programs at fepblue.org/getactive.
Hi, I'm Paul. I used to ask if you could hear me now with Verizon, but I switched to Sprint. They changed the game again with unlimited freedom. Unlimited mobile optimized streaming videos, gaming, music, and data. Starting at $40 per line for a family of 4. Live unlimited. Can you hear that? Visit sprint.com/freedom today.
Coverage and offer not everywhere for discounted phones. Prices with auto pay discount subject to credit and $30 activation fee. Excludes taxes, surcharges, roaming, and premium content. Streaming may be mobile optimized with video up to 480p and music up to 500 kilobytes per second. Games limited up to 2 megabytes per second. Prohibited network use rules apply and data deprioritization during congestion restrictions apply.